Yeah, I know what you mean. The grey sludge stuff is like the worst. Like actually, just going down the street, you're
Yeah.
like, oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you guys get like a lot of snow or not in the UK or go through that.
Not really. We used to get loads, especially where I am at the moment. It's like the highest point of this area,
Yeah.
or near the highest point of this area. So if it was going to snow anywhere, it would snow here. But last 2 years, just nothing really.
Really? Wow.
It's kind of crazy.
Global warming doing its thing, which is not good,
Yeah,
but
no,
like,
it literally is. It literally
yeah,
is. But
yeah,
yes,
it's
I'm
awesome.
glad to have you here, man.
Yeah, glad to be
It's a
here, man.
pleasure.
Thanks for asking for me to be on. Like, I'm honored.
No, pleasure's all mine, but dude, I
Yeah,
get comfortable, get my tea, we got water.
yeah, I got my water.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Um, you were set. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Do you want to start with just like telling us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, all that kind of.
yeah, totally. Well, yeah. My name is David. I am a couple things actually, I guess. So by day, I'm a product designer. I work in tech. A Yeah, I work in tech as a product designer. That's like my day-to-day job. I
Mm.
used to, or not used to be, but like I guess you could call a Twitch streamer. I am currently on hibernation though, taking a bit of a, or not hibernation, a bit of a hiatus. Taking a bit of a break from all of it to focus on myself. So I am currently doing. I'm taking a break like indefinitely, essentially. But yeah, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Yeah.
No, it's cool, man. I love it. I remember coming into your stream. It was, I think it must have been one of your last streams, or one of the last streams
Mm,
you did, um, before like this hiatus. And I just remember like going through some of your stuff. I went through like a bit of your like when you just go on someone's
yeah.
profile and you just kind of like have a browse,
Yeah.
and I was like, huh, this guy's got like a really nice perspective on life. It's why I kind of reached out to you because I was like, this guy's got like a lot of drive. I really like it. And like kind of go. I kind of deep dived you. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's all good.
Like
I mean, it's all
right
there.
down. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really fun to kind of see where you've come from and like kind of where you're going, which hopefully we'll dive into now, which is kind of
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely.
What when you say you're taking a break now,
Yeah.
what to work on yourself, what does that mean?
So essentially, for the past couple months, I would say, right, like I've been feeling, like I'm still trying to figure it out, but like the way I can like kind of piece it together is essentially, I haven't really been feeling like myself, really, right? Like it's almost like I lost myself, in because of like different reasons in my life, and not just all because of streaming or anything like that. Like, streaming is part of it. Um, but like, not fully all of it is different, definitely other factors. But yeah, essentially, like I've recognized that, or I slowly started to recognize that, like, I don't feel like myself. Like I feel like I've lost myself. I'm constantly like anxious all the time. The sort of analogy that I used when I was talking about this on one of my very last streams before I took my break, was that it truly feels like I'm standing in the middle of the dark on ice, and if I take another step forward or in any direction, I'm just gonna fall through. So I don't go anywhere, right? And it's kind of like that's like how it feels to me. Like when I try to paint the picture to people of like what this feels like to me right now, that's exactly how it feels. Where it's like I'm just walking on super thin ice, and I'm too scared to kind of like move anywhere, because it feel in my head it feels like I've lost myself. I can't make decisions. Like things are, um, I don't have a direction at all, right, or any sort of like guidance to anything. So yeah, I decided to basically essentially detach myself from, or like slowly start to detach myself from like a lot of the things that I'm quote unquote committed to, right? So streaming being one of them, right? With the goal of like trying to kind of cliche to say, but to quite literally like find myself again, right? So I can like take steps forward without any sort of like anxiety or anything like that.
Mm.
And yeah, that's kind of where the break comes from. Not sure how long it'll last, but we're on this journey now, so yeah, kind of
That's a
that.
lot. That's a lot to unpick, like straight off the bat, which I love because you've
Yeah,
obviously put
yeah,
time and thought into this, and you're like, okay, I need to kind of reset. When you said there's like, obviously you can go into like being as comfortable, or you can go into as much or as little detail as you want. When you say there was like factors that have gone into
Yeah.
losing yourself, what kind of stuff does that include?
Yeah, to be completely honest with you, I'm still trying to like figure that out. I'm still trying to like decipher it, right? Like, as of right now, it's really just a feeling. I would definitely say I'm very like just self-aware, like a very self-aware individual. Like I will recognize things about myself like fairly quickly. Yeah. But I have a harder time like figuring out where they come from. Right, like just like
Mm.
most other people. I think like I think streaming is one of them. I think just other factors in my life are one of them as well. I think the key thing though is really like because I've put so much attention on other things and people, right? So like when you're streaming, like your attention is like really much like focused on your chat, or like you're kind of
Mm.
focused on like your stream, right? Like and like making that as entertaining as possible, making that as like as best as possible for like your viewers, right? Because they're they're the people that are really supporting you, so you want to make it good for them, right? That's one
Mm.
example. Another
100%.
example could be like you know your Discord, for example. Like I don't know how your Discord community is like, but to me, like I take great I have great like I take great responsibility in making sure my Discord is in a good place, and making sure that that's all good. The thing I'm trying to get at is essentially like I felt like my attention was just like not on me and so much on everything else, that there was no more room to have for my own attention to be on myself. And I think that's where it comes from. Like, when you do that over like a very long period of time, like I would say like for streaming, I've taken like small breaks here and there, but there were like a couple days or like a week or so,
Mm.
right? And but nothing ever more than that. And I've been doing it for um, over like a little bit over a year. And to some people that might be like, oh yeah, that's nothing. But like to me, that was like going all in, like full in, like into there, right?
Mm.
So after for doing that for like a very long time, right, on top of like other things like life things like work, other relationships, friendships, things like that,
Mm.
other problems as well that are happening, that are like sort of out of my control. It kind of conditions you to think about yourself almost like as secondary, even like tertiary, right? Like you're not the primary like thing anymore. Your mind is constantly on like another thing, right? Which by default means
Mm.
that you're no longer the primary source of um like to yourself. You're no longer the primary like thing, right? Which is very bad, in my opinion, right? And then that's kind of how like I would say like at least how I think about it right now. It's kind of how I lost myself, is because of that. And
I,
now I'm trying
I
to like crawl
I
myself
fully
back up. But yeah,
understand. No, it's good. I understand what you're saying. If you don't look after yourself, you can't. At least in my experiences, if you kind of neglect yourself, you can't show up as the best version of yourself in all these other areas that
yeah,
you're trying to
exactly.
work on.
Yeah,
And then it all just like you said, it all just kind of crumbles down.
yeah,
It's interesting what you say about attention as well. Like when you're like, I feel like I'm standing in the dark on thin ice, and it's literally sounds like you're spreading yourself like so thin, like your attention on all these areas. What was the kind of process from being like, right, I need to kind of draw a line? Because I mean, you probably know as well, so many people struggle with stuff,
yeah,
so many people like just stress, burn out, everything.
yeah.
How were you able to draw the line and say, okay, I need to step back and do this?
Yeah, totally. It was a slow process for sure. Right. To answer your first question, I haven't been on hiatus for that long. Like I announced on my stream, like I think like a week and a half ago. So it's very,
Okay.
very recent. Right. But yeah, I've been thinking about this for about like a month and a half, or so already, right? And I think the point where in which it drew the line for me was when, um, I started realizing that and recognizing that I had the hardest time making like any sort of decision, right? Whether that was streaming, whether I was going out, whether I was hanging out with friends, whether it was like work things, right? Like I just couldn't make decisions, right? Because I was just so anxious about all of them. Because I just, I cared a little bit too much about like what other people thought about like the decision that I was about to make, because it's what I've been conditioned to kind of do for the past like year. Right? It's just like I have to care
In,
about like other, other people's perceptions,
in what
or
way were
else
you
like,
anxious?
I think like I didn't know like what the perception was going to be like. I'm someone that really hates ambiguity, by the way. Like I like need to know things. So when I don't know something, I get really, really like kind of like angsty about it. But yeah, in a way, it's like I was just scared of what people were gonna think, right? I was like, you know, for example, like the decision of like, pressing the go stream button, like stream now button, right? Like a very simple thing. I'm always like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I want to stream today. Like, I feel kind of scared. Like, are people going to show up? Like, what's going to happen? Am I going to be talking to a wall? Right. Is it as exciting as I think it is going to be for other people? Like, I'm just overthinking the entire thing. Right. And that happened, that like, ripple effects into like the rest of the things in my life. Right. Like I remember one day I couldn't even really make a decision on what I wanted to like eat, or something as simple as that. And, even going to like a coffee shop, I'm like standing there looking at the menu for like 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is a long time to be staring at a menu at a coffee shop. I don't know. Yeah. Just trying to like process like what I'm looking at and like what do I want. Right. So yeah, that's kind of like how it came to be. But like the whole process of deciding to like I have to cut this out like now, right, was a slow process. It was something that I recognized about like a month and a half, 2 months ago, and slowly and slowly and slowly, it's something that I started thinking about more and more and more. And I had mentioned this on like my last stream, is that the moment I recognized it, it actually went even more downhill. At that point, it's because I recognized it, right? But it's in a good way, I would say, right? It's like you recognize it, which is good, which means like it actually kind of sucks even more now, but at least you recognize it and you can kind of like crawl like
It
do
becomes
things to
real.
like, yeah, yeah, you can actually like do things to crawl yourself out of that hole. Um, but yeah, it was a slow process, and the moments that kind of like, it was an accumulation of moments of where like I'm anxious about streaming, I'm anxious about making this decision. Like sending a message to my team at work takes like 30 minutes because I'm like rereading this like one sentence for so long. Right, when it should just literally be like press enter and then go and then move on with your day. Like just the simple things that take like that should only take you like quite literally seconds to decide, took me like 30 minutes, like a long time, like way longer than it's supposed to be, because of anxiety and how I feel about other people like perceiving this thing. But yeah, so when I recognized it, it was basically like I need to detach myself completely, and just slowly like taking weight off my shoulders, and committing to that. But
Almost just
sorry, that was a
rebooting,
very
like.
long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear your story and how it all, like, you can see the process that your mind's going through. You're noticing it, you're acknowledging it. I know, especially for myself, when you admit to having like a problem, it's not a problem, but you're in a certain position in your life or a certain situation, and you say, yeah, you acknowledge it. You're like, oh, that's real. Yeah, I'm fucked
Yeah.
up. Like,
Yeah. And that's
yeah, but
crazy,
it's
right?
okay.
Like it's a crazy realization when you like when you like
Yeah.
fully acknowledge it, that like, yeah, I'm totally messed up. I actually remember talking to I remember talking to a friend about this, and he called me and he's like, "Yo, how's it going? Whatever," right? And I straight up told him like, I feel so messed up in the head right now, and it's not even like a joke. Like I'm being completely honest. Like fully admitting that I was fully admitting that I was like, I think I'm in like one of the worst places in my life, like mentally, because I've never had this problem before
Shit.
of struggling with just things, right? And yeah, so fully admitting it is a first step, but it's definitely takes a toll, for sure.
It's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really difficult. Especially like you said, when there's it's almost like a feedback loop. Like you're anxious to go live or to do like these projects, send a message,
Yeah.
of what the people are going to think, and then you want to take a step back, and then you're like, well, what are people going to think about this?
Yeah,
Like...
right, like exactly. At one point you kind of just have to like commit to it, right? And that's the first step, right? Like that's the first step to just like getting better, like just in general, right? Because you can't, I mean, you can't just live in this in this darkness, like on this like really thin ice, like for forever, right? So at one point you kind of have to take this leap of like, not really leap of faith, but like just this leap of a decision, and you get very uncomfortable, right? But I always say like the greatest things in life are always on the other side of fear, or on the other side of like comfortability. So that's the first step, and that
I really
first
love
step in
that. I
the
think it's
upwards
Will
direction.
Smith, like
Yeah.
relating things to taking that.
Yeah,
Taking
yeah,
that
yeah. I
step
think,
is,
yeah,
is
I
tough.
definitely didn't say that. I definitely didn't say that. But like,
No, it's fine.
someone
No, it's
has
fine,
said
man.
that, and I have, I've remembered it forever, and I believe it. So yeah,
It sticks. It definitely sticks.
yeah.
It's big, and it's where do you think like the expectations of doing stuff like come from? Is it like a childhood thing, like an old, like a something from the past, or just something you've noticed? Because obviously, no matter what you do, whether you're going for a job or streaming or even just posting something on social media, even if you're not trying to build an audience, just like a hey, I'm
Yeah.
at a cafe, like I'm on. There's so much pressure from
Yeah.
other people,
Yeah.
like all the time.
Um,
Is that something that you've always had?
yeah, I mean, not before, no. Right? Like I was like, when I wanted to do something before, like before this whole like problem, I didn't really care about like what other people thought. I would just kind of like go ahead and do it, right? Especially if I thought about it a lot. But you're right though, there is a lot of pressure, right? There's this like hidden pressure for, at least right now for me, like there is a lot of pressure, right? I think where that comes from is, when you're so used to doing things like, taking the lead, taking the charge on like initiatives or like just things, right? Like you're that person that will like, if he thinks about it, he's gonna do it, right? Type of person. There is this perception of you, right, that from like the outside world, that like you have to like uphold your commitment that you've like publicized, right? And if you don't, then like it just looks like bad, right? Or like your quote unquote reputation kind of like dwindles a little bit, right? Or it's a disappointment if you don't like keep up with it, right? Because you're just known as that person to when you do something, you complete it, you finish it, you take it all the way, and you don't like step back, you don't give up on it, right? And I think just like from the very beginning, like my early on in life, like I've been kind of conditioned to do that. I'm an only child, by the way, right? So I think that's also another factor of like this sort of like hyper independence that I feel like I have, where if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to go ahead, I have to finish it, like I have to like do it, right? Especially if I'm going to like publicize it and tell the world about it, like you have to take it all the way, which is actually, I actually think is a little bit unhealthy, to some extent, right? It's good because it's an accountability sort of mindset, but like if you take it a bit too far and it's at the cost of like your own well-being, your own health and stuff like that, that's definitely not good, right? But yeah, basically you become a psychopath. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's where it comes from for at least someone like me. But generally though, I do think that there is like societal pressure on just like everyone, right? Like if we live in this world now where like whatever you post on the internet, right, whether that's social media, whether that's going live on Twitch, whether that's like whatever, like just needs to be so crafted, that if it's not, right, you start to have like all these different thoughts of like, oh, it's not good enough, like there's not enough quote unquote likes, like there's not enough viewers, right? Like you start comparing yourself to like your friends, your other people, like your whatever, like the world, right? And it's gone to a point where, because we live in that sort of like society, and we essentially put value on this fucking number. I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear on this
Yeah,
on
no,
this podcast?
absolutely.
Yeah, on, you know, we put value on like the most like arbitrary things. um
Mm,
it really messes up with our mental a little bit, right? Like we don't, like, I feel like we don't post things for the sake, we don't share things anymore unless it's like close to perfect, right? Which puts a lot of
mm.
pressure on, like, you know, the build up to that post, right? Or the build up of like whatever it is that you're sharing. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the
crazy.
process.
It's yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is mental. I can't remember who said it, but I was watching a
Yeah.
video. It's possibly been a year or so ago now, and it's like people don't go out for like a day at the beach with their friends. They go to the beach to take pictures for Instagram, to then like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
No,
like, huh?
seriously.
And
Yeah.
I've definitely, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
everybody's
Go on,
guilty
after
of
you.
it, right? Like even me too. But like it's
Yeah,
like it's kind of like insane in a way, right? Like you plan these like trips that are supposed to be fun, that's supposed to be like more present, like you're supposed to be hanging out with your friends, but the only thing you think about is like, I can't wait to go to the beach and post this Instagram story and, like, you know, share
it's
it. And
gonna look
it's
so
like,
good.
that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, you know, it's a little bit messed up when that's like the only thing you think about, right? Or like the priority,
Yeah, when you're
right?
putting the value.
But you know,
Mm. When you're
yeah,
putting the value in those
yeah,
numbers, for sure, especially, you know, streaming or creating kinds of content and stuff. There's definitely it's broadcast to you. It's like, this is how many followers you got, this is how much watch time you have, this is how many likes this post got, and
yeah,
you're like, oh wow, the post is down like 50 likes or 10 viewers, or, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
this is not like the pressure
yeah,
builds up. But
yeah.
interestingly, do you think this pressure is actual real pressure, or do you think it's pressure that we put on ourselves?
Oh, it's 100% put on ourselves. Right.
Yeah.
Like, at least in my opinion, like, I actually always think like anything that, any sort of stress that you go through, at least in most cases, right? Any sort of stress that you go through, any sort of like bad times that you're kind of thinking about, like any sort of pressure is 90% of the time self-induced. Right.
Mm,
Because you're, you know, I truly believe we, um as humans, as individuals, we have like the power to basically say like, no, I'm not going to be stressed out about that, right? And I'm gonna, like, you know, figure it out, right? Obviously it's not as trivial as that, but like, you know, I do think that a lot of the stress that we go through, a lot of the pressures that we go through is self-induced. It's because it's how we perceive it, right? It's our own
mm,
perception of the world is what is causing it to be stressful, right? And, you know, I think this is, stress and pressure is subjective, right? So what I always come back to this example, but, you know, in university, you could have like an engineer, right? That's studying engineering, and you can have someone
mm,
that's studying, like, you know, something more creative like art. Let's just say, for example, right? The engineer is going to tell you that like they're super stressed, right? I have to do all this stuff, like, you know, I have so many projects, and the art person is going to tell you, I'm also super stressed, right? But to the engineer, sometimes like they're going to be like, what do you mean you're stressed? Like, all you're doing is like drawing, right? It's a different kind of pressure, but it's subjective, right?
mm,
So the stress is subjective, which means that like it doesn't matter like where it comes from, right? But if you're feeling stressed, that it's because you have decided to feel stressed out, right? Like, it's just subconsciously. But that comes from like how you perceive the world, right? So again, someone who is going to be running like 100 laps around a track will think of that as like a piece of cake, but to someone else, it's going to be like, that's going to be terrible. Right. So it's all self-induced, just depending on like how you perceive the world around you.
it sounds like you've gone through experiences where you've like, how did you learn that kind of that it's all about your perspective?
Yeah. It's a great question. Like, I think it's definitely an overtime thing. It's definitely something, not something that I learned like, you know, overnight, right?
Yeah, you don't just
I
wake
think I
up.
would say that, yeah, I didn't just wake up and be suddenly become like, you know, like that.
Oh, it's
I think
perspective.
it
Yeah.
was, yeah, 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 yeah. No, I think it was when I was in it was when I was in university, most likely, like for sure. That's when it started, right? And it's when I actually switched to design school. So a bit of background for everybody. My academic sort of life started out in, you know, geography and urban planning. At a very
Mm,
like one of like the, you know, I would say probably one of the, like the top schools in Canada, right? 2.5 years into that journey, I was like, I hate this. Like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. There's no way. Right. And at that point in time, I was very into like design. I was very into like creative things. Right. I was, I wanted to express myself in some ways. And so the TLDR is that I ended up switching schools entirely, different program to go to design school. And I didn't really know what I was expecting from design school. All I knew was I wanted to do it. But so when I was doing my geography degree and urban planning, it was hard. When I was doing it, I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm struggling, right? This is actually really difficult. But then when I got to design school, it was even harder. And it was not something that I was expecting, right? And it's at that moment when I got both perspectives of on the outside, someone might think design school is quite easy, right? Or it's because I don't, there's no exams when you're in design school, right? There's no tests, right? It's only just projects. But I would actually argue that doing projects is much more stressful than doing a 2-hour exam. Right? Because when you're doing a project, you are in that thing for basically as long as as you need it to be, for it to be as good as you need it to be for yourself. When you're doing a 2-hour test, you're done in 2 hours, right? So that's just one example, but it was at that moment when I had gone both perspectives of traditional degree schooling and subjective, school, which is slightly different type of schooling, where I started realizing that it's subjective, the way that you think about stress, right? And that not everything is equal in stress, depending on who you are as a person, right? So it was during that moment in time where I was realizing that my God, I wish I could just do a 2-hour test and be over, instead of spending 10 hours on this project, right? God damn it. Yeah, all-nighters, right? It was in during those moments where I was really recognizing the differences from perspectives and stuff like that. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's nice. Yeah, it's super interesting. Like you said, the perspective on it is, or I'm a believer that the perspective on it is huge. I'm reading, what's the book called? The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I think it is, the Mark Manson book.
Yeah.
And he's all about I've never read it before. I think I started reading it and then never got to the end. I picked it up recently, and he's all about life sucks. It doesn't matter what you do, it's always gonna suck. Go with the stuff that you enjoy sucking.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I've read little bits and pieces of it. But yeah, no, I definitely gotta read that too.
It's really good. It's really good. It's kind of similar to what you said. Whether you everybody has money problems, whether you're living paycheck to paycheck or you're Warren Buffett, you have money problems. It's just different scales of problems. Wherever you are, whether you're whatever course you're in, you have different stresses, depending on what you go on.
Yeah, I think it really hones in on the fact that you really don't know what's going on in someone else's life, right? Which is something that most people should be more empathetic about, I feel or just think about it a little bit more. Is that yes, you're going through a hard time, but that doesn't you can't de-emphasize someone else's stress because of how stressful your life is, right? You can't diminish someone else's problems just because you think your problems are bigger, right? You just can't do that. That's just
Is that something you've experienced?
Not directly, right? I don't think I've ever experienced that directly, but I notice it for sure, right? In interactions with people, interactions with some friends as well, right? When comments like this come up where what do you mean you can I wish I could just have your life and not have tests or whatever, right? And that in a way diminishes the amount of work that you're doing, right? Just because I don't have tests, for example, right? But they don't understand that it's just as hard or even harder, right? Because of that fact. So it's a very closed-minded approach towards stress. But I mean, they're not a bad person. Whoever does that aren't bad people or anything like that. They just I just feel they need to open up their minds a little bit more. But I haven't experienced that directly. But it's something that I've observed.
Yeah, it's a very face value. It's a flippant way of dealing with it. Yeah. It's you don't even do exams. What the fuck? It's not it's not a conversation. It's just kind of seems like small talk.
Yeah.
At that point, it's interesting though. You're saying about on being on the ice, like having a hiatus to trying to find yourself. What sort of process? I know you said you're quite early on in it, but what kind of process do you think that you're kind of going through, or plan to go through, or
Yeah.
what kind of direction do you think you're gonna step, kind of going into the future?
Yeah, totally. Self-reflection for sure. Right. Like a lot of self-reflection. Right. And there's a lot of different ways in which I'm thinking about like actually being active on that. Right. I think at its general core, like self-reflection can happen at any point in time, anywhere. Like you don't need to be in like a specific place with a specific type of person to like self-reflect like effectively. Right. But they do help. Right. Like like changing your environment helps a lot, right? So for me, I had like on a whim like decided like I'm gonna take a solo trip down to California, right? And I've actually never done a solo trip before where I'm like completely like by myself, right? And so as a way to like kind of like just rediscover and like change my environment and just like try to do things on my own, right? Really like putting myself like neck deep into like you have to do this alone, like you have to like take the steps that you're taking like on your own, right? And it's not that I'm like pushing out help or anything like that. It like, yeah, I'm very much welcome to like I'm very grateful to the people that are like trying to help me out like on the outside and stuff like that. But I do think that like it doesn't really matter how much help you get on the outside if you yourself don't actually like take that first step forward. So this is like one of those active things where like just forcing the activity of doing things alone for like an entire week is something that I'm going to be actively doing in very soon in like a month. But overall it's just self-reflection, just like spending time alone, spending time with my own thoughts, which I used to do a lot, which I think is why I had like why I was like in a better place like before like a year ago, right? But there hasn't been a lot of time for that lately. So self-reflecting, bettering myself like physically as well, whether that's like working out, going on runs, like doing it just physically getting
Yeah.
better. Yeah, just physical workouts, and on just doing things on a spiritual level. It's just more of like thinking about what is truly important in life, right? And yeah, that is something that I think about a lot, especially like this week. It's been quite heavy. I would say that has like really like pushed me over the edge about like thinking of self-reflection and like thinking about like what are the actual important things in life, right? I'll give you like I'm not gonna go into the details of it, but like this week I had found out that a very close friend of mine actually passed away, and that definitely took a bit. Yeah, no, it's all good. Like thank you, but yeah, it's all good. And that definitely took a huge hit, right? It was like a wake up call, of you need to think about like what truly matters here, right? And that's just part of the self reflection journey as well. So, yeah, long winded answer. I'm so sorry, but yeah, yeah,
No, it's
yeah,
it's awesome. It's nice to hear your process. I think, like you were saying, with your friend, big kind of life events like that, like milestones, is a wake up call, and it's hard. It's hard
yeah.
hitting, obviously, with the loss of a friend, and in turn, it's like when someone on the opposite side, when someone gets married, like two friends get married, you're like, oh shit, like,
Yeah. There's definitely happy moments too that can count
oh,
as yeah, 100%. Yeah,
yeah, happens both ways for sure.
yeah, yeah,
I really am interested in what you were saying about being by yourself. I feel
yeah,
I resonate with that a lot. A lot of people, or keeping it kind of personal, I used to spend a lot of time with myself, especially like meditating, self-reflecting, just listening to music or whatever. Um, and then they're
right,
going for a stage of just being around friends all the time, like very rarely having like downtime.
yeah.
Um, I even watched a video or a meditation this morning. It was like, if you're miserable when you're alone, you're in bad company. And I was like, oh, damn, that's
Oh
so.
yeah, 100%, 100%. I don't know if you ever heard of this saying, but you are the average of the five people that you hang around with the most,
Mm, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if you like, whenever you're not with those people and you feel terrible, you got to change up like your circle, or like your environment. I would say. Like there's a direct
Yeah, it's
relationship
well,
there,
it's
I
like you
think.
said. Yeah, it's definitely a mixture of like your environment, the people you're with.
Yeah,
Like you said, your relationship with yourself is huge. It's huge. Like I
yeah,
said, if you're going on to stream and you're like, I'm feeling a bit anxious, like this is all outside my control. I don't know if people are gonna come in. Am I excited? Am I like all the stuff that's kind of related to that? Like that's how you're showing up, and then you're kind of bouncing that energy off yourself,
yeah,
and it's like, yeah, it can get so messy,
yeah.
so quickly.
And on that, right? Like, I think like, so 100%, like I 100% agree with you, right? But there is a part as well where I do feel like when you're in that state of mind, you are still over indexing on like trying to make the stream like as best as possible, right? But it could go a little bit too far to the point where like you're almost faking it, right? Like you're like acting it out, right? Which like is another layer on top of like this sort of not being yourself, like losing yourself in like this like world, right? Because you want it to be good, so you hide away like all the negative emotions, because that like if I'm negative, then like it's gonna bounce off to other people, and like you don't want the vibe to like come down crashing, right?
It's not
So
good.
what do you do? Like yeah, it's not good. Like what do you do? Like you just you kind of like suppress it, and then you essentially like maybe not fake it out, but like kind of act it out, right? Like you act out
You
like
put on a mask,
being
I
all
think.
joyful and stuff, right? You put on a mask. Yeah, exactly, you put on a mask, right? And it feels bad, right? Like for yourself, and doing that over and over and over again, like you definitely end up like losing, you end up losing a bit of identity, of who you actually
Yeah,
are,
for sure.
which can take a toll.
I think it's something that we all do as well. Like in terms of like even when you're with a group of friends and you're like, oh, like how you doing? And you're like, mask on. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Like how... even when you just had like the
Yeah,
worst day ever, it's like an exaggeration.
exactly,
And obviously, it's
right,
different if you have
exactly.
30, 40 people watching you at the same time.
Yeah,
If it's streaming it or any sort of content, it could be at work, like wherever it is. For
yeah,
sure. Right, let's have a little look through these notes. There's so much to unpick, man. Like I like
yeah,
so
no,
much how
totally.
reflective you've been. Like because you face, like you said, you're very self aware. Like if you feel or you seem very self aware in the sense that if you have a problem like stress, you're like, oh, this is a call to take action. Like I need to do something different here,
Yeah,
which I think a lot of people, myself included, for a lot of years, like early 20s, I would feel stressed. I would feel miserable, maybe even like borderline depression, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna just stay here. Like I'm not gonna react to it. Like you just kind of sit in it, and it becomes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? Like it's not easy. Like recognizing it is one thing, taking action on it is like a whole other thing, right? Like there's been many times where like I've recognized something, but I took like months to like do anything about it, right? But like yeah, and this is where like personal development comes in, right? Right, which is something that like I wanted to talk about, is you have to be self-reflective, right? Like you can't, when you're feeling negative emotions, whether that's coming from yourself, external factors like your friends, your parents, whatever, like from anything, right? You have to reflect on it if it's affecting you like daily, right? And you have to think about it. You can't just push it to the side, because that's just delaying the problem, right? So I think in those moments, those moments where you like have a problem, and you face it head on, right? Like you just fully admit like this is a problem, and I'm like in the shitter right now, right? And I need to like figure something out. That is when like you kind of like reach this next level of awareness of really taking things head on for yourself, and that's like where you reach the next level of personal development as well, right? Is because it takes a lot of courage to actually do something like that, in my opinion, right? To really
100%,
admit
dude.
that like I'm in the worst place ever, right? Or like this situation sucks, and I have to do something about it. Like that takes a lot of courage. Because you're right, like a lot of people, especially in like their early 20s, will just like push it off, or like go out drinking, or like just have distractions that just like gets their mind off the problem, and those are all temporary solutions, right? Because at the end of the day, when you come back home, you lay in your bed, the only thing that's there is you, yourself, and your thoughts, right? So it's not gonna go away until you like truly think about it and just reflect on it. which is something that I just want to like send out to the world, right? Is like, if you are having a problem, like just take the time to just acknowledge it, like really truthfully acknowledge it, and just think about your position in this whole like situation, because you will feel a lot lighter at the end of it. Like, it might suck going through it because you're like acknowledging all these things and admitting to like defeat essentially, right? But it's those defeats that really like put us in a better position once we get out of them, right? We have more perspective now. We're literally wiser, right? Because we've gone through this like hell. And you don't delay hell. You don't stop there. Like, you push through it and like you try to like get to the other side. And hopefully you can help other people with that perspective, that new perspective as well. But yeah. I can talk about this all
It's
day.
interesting when
like,
mate, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. It's almost
Yeah.
like, kind of tying it in with the last metaphor. It's almost like taking the mask off that you may wear in front of other people, but for yourself. And it's like you're like, it takes so much courage though. I feel like a lot of people, I know, like I said in the past, it's a long process. It can take months. It can take years. For myself, it took over a year. I knew deep down there was always like, I need to change something. I need to get fitter and healthier physically. I need to see a therapist. I need to sort finances out, whatever it was, or a mixture of all of them. But it takes a tremendous amount of courage. In the situations that you've been in, did your courage come from you making a stand, or did it come from like almost necessity to be like, I can't take this anymore, like I have to face this?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of both, right? Like, of both, like, I have to take a stand and I literally can't take this anymore, right? And it comes from two places, I think, right? Taking a stand is self-respect, right? I'm huge on just like self-respect. When I see someone like disrespecting themselves because of like what they're doing or whatever, I actually get upset for them, right? Because like, how can you do that to yourself? Like, you're straight up like disrespecting yourself here, right? So taking a stand is all about self-respect, which should be like top of mind all the time, right? Necessity is coming from a place of like almost like self-love, right? Like, you have to do this for yourself, like out of love, right? Like, if you like love yourself, then you will get yourself out of this like misery, right? And you might only recognize that when you get pushed to the absolute limit, right? And it's essentially like the world giving you the challenge of like, well, you're at this absolute limit, right? Like, will you take the path of like self-love and self-respect, or you take the path of like just rolling over and continuing with this like this terrible thing, right? And
Staying in hell.
it should staying in hell, right? Like, so you have to, ideally you should pick like self-love and like out of necessity, right? Because you can't, I don't think you can live like without any kind of love, like whether that's from yourself or whatever, right? Like, there has to be some form of it. So, but yeah, there has been many moments in my past where that has happened, right? And the one that I talk about all the time, I've talked about this on my stream like a gazillion times as well. But like, I remember I was in this was in the point where I was switching programs entirely, right? This was in university. I was in geography, urban planning. I was at a very like a pretty top school in Canada, right? Like, this is like the school that everybody, all the parents want their kids to go to, right? And coming from an Asian family, a very like traditional Asian family, like status is everything, right? Like, them seeing you go to a school like this is like, it makes them happy. It's like proud, right? But it's proud and happy for all the wrong reasons, honestly, because it's like it's just status, right? It looks good, and they can brag about it to like their friends and family and whatever, right? So when I tell people that like, when I had told people that like, yeah, I'm really not feeling it, I recently got into this design school, but it's at another school in Toronto, and which on paper is terrible, right? Like, the program was actually really good. The program is actually very prestigious, right? But the school itself is known to, have like, it's just a terrible culture, like there's like shit that happens all the time, like people get stabbed, like there's really like bad things like that. It's like the ghetto, like it's like the ghetto of the schools, right? And when you
Jesus, yeah, it
tell,
sounds intense.
yeah, and when you tell your, it's okay, it's not that crazy, but like it's essentially like the ghetto of the schools, right? Um, and when you tell your Asian parents and essentially everybody else around you that like, yeah, I'm actually switching out of this school to go to like this school, the immediate thought is like, what the like, what are you doing, right? Like, why would you do that, right? Like, that's literally the worst decision you can possibly make, right? You're at a very good school here. You're 2.5 years into your degree. Like, you should just finish and like, you're gonna be set afterwards, right? Like, your life is gonna be set. If you go to this school, right, and you transfer, you're starting all over again, right? They go on strike all the time. You're not even sure if you're going to finish your degree in like the appropriate amount of time, right? And the school has a terrible reputation. But what they don't know is that like the program is actually very good. It's actually it's one of the top design programs in Ontario, I would say, right? But like, so the perception was that like, oh, David is like literally taking the worst decision of his life, right? Like this is going to be a mistake. Essentially, if you do this. And everybody that I was talking to was like, you shouldn't do this. Like, it's a waste of time. Like, you're going to waste your money, right? Like, you're at a very good school and a very good program right now, right? Like, you should just finish and then you're going to get a job. You're going to be set, right? If you just stay here. And quite literally, everyone except for my educational advisor told me, no, don't do it. And my education advisor was the only person that actually supported me in this this whole like, shenanigan of like switching schools. So, it was at that moment where I was faced with the challenge of like, well, like, if I stay here, I'm going to like literally like shoot myself, right? Cause I can't do this for the rest of my life. And so do I pick the path of like self-respect? Do I take a stand and be like, no, like I'm going for this, right? And self-love. And I did. Right. And, I had accepted I didn't even tell my parents and I accepted my offer. Right. And, I told them like, they called me one day and they're like, yeah, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, I just accepted my offer to design school and they're so disappointed. Like it's like the worst like thing for them. Right. And so, but I took a stand, right? I was like, no, like I'm going to do this, right? Cause like, if I don't, then I would feel like I'm disrespecting myself and I would be disappointing myself at the end of the day. Right. And I would regret it deeply. And that was one of those moments where I was like, it really hit me that you have all the power, to change like your life around, or even small bits of your life for the better. Right. It doesn't matter how many people like say no, don't support you, right? Or even it doesn't matter how close they are to you. It could be your best friend, it could be your parents, could be your siblings, whatever, right? Like it doesn't matter where it comes from, right? If you think that this is better for you, right? If you will feel regret if you don't take action on this thing, right? It is your responsibility to, have enough self-respect to take that step forward, regardless of what everybody says. And, it was at that moment I had recognized and realized all those things, right, within the span of like a week or like a week to a month. And ever since then, like I've really come at like most major decisions with that in mind. Like, will I regret it if I don't move forward with this, right? Like what is the path of self-respect and self-love, right? And move towards that direction, regardless of like how bad it feels in like that point in time, right? Like you could be leaving like some of like your best friends, right? For the sake of like your own like growth. And you should, right? Cause like, I think like in those moments, it also like a bunch of different things also start to appearing off the surface, right? Your true friends, your true like people that are there to support you will support you, right? They might tell you that like, I'm a little bit iffy on this, but like, if you truly think that this is better for you, I want you to go for it, right? And they will support you 100% of the way. The people who are not there for you will literally like just quite not support you. Like they will just say like, that's the worst decision ever. You don't want those people in your life. Like it's just, that's just negative energy right there, right? So you start recognizing those things as well, right? And you start it really like brings out like the true perspective of some people, right? Whether all they think about is like status, right? Or all they think about is like being stable and having a good job, even though you're miserable in it, right? It truly like brings out like what they actually care about, right? And I'm not judging any of them, but if it doesn't align with like what I think about, like I wouldn't really want to talk to you, right? Just because I don't think I can. But yeah, that was definitely a moment of like transcendence. I feel like where I've just like reached another like level of personal development, another like level of like mentality of everything really comes from you. At the end of the day, it's you have the decision. You have to make the decision to whether like shoot yourself in the foot or take a better path. And I truly believe that with every decision, right, you shouldn't be like people shouldn't have influence over that decision, right? Like you have to make that at the end of the day for yourself. And that is, in my opinion, like the highest form of self-respect when it literally makes no sense to everybody else around you, but to you it does, and you take that step forward, and regardless of what everybody says, right? That's like a really, really high form of self-respect, in my opinion, and everybody should lead with that. Sorry, that was very
That's
long.
powerful, man.
Yeah.
That's no, I love it.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. What a story, man.
Yeah.
Jesus. It's intense.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's
It,
self-respect, self-love is paramount. From both our personal experiences, I'm sure a lot of other people that I know, there is no self-respect. There is no not even not a clear definition of values, but even an idea
Right.
of what those values should be to them, like you
Right.
said, and
Yeah.
and like going through that
It,
process to discover them is
yeah,
intense.
it's
Go on.
difficult, right? Like, it's hard. Like, and another thing that is like really pulled out of like the depths of like my emotional self is um the reason why I actually think it's actually difficult for a lot of people is because they don't have their own definition of like their own value, like what they value, right? Or like they don't have their own definition of what success looks like to them, right? So what ends up happening when you don't have your own definition of success or values or whatever it is, your North Star, right? You end up living life based on the perception of other people, based on other people's perception of success, right? You start thinking about like, what does that person think is successful? Then I will use that as my definition, right? Which is like a terrible way to go about it. But it's the natural way to go about it as well, right? Like it's just the natural like act of comparison, right? And like
Sure.
using other people as mirrors and reflecting off of them. Right. It's what like feels the most comfortable when you're like kind of like just starting to think about these things. Right. But it's actually very detrimental, right? Because you will feel like you're not really living your life anymore. You're just living someone else's life through like their eyes of what they view as like valuable and success. And you like adjust your life to fit that model. Right. And subconsciously, like you might not even think about it, but you are literally like sabotaging yourself for the sake of someone else's view, right? And like why are you doing that, right? Like it makes no
It's a good
sense.
question.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And but until you have like your own firm definition of what success looks like or values or whatever your North Star is, you will default to what someone else's version of that is. And I think like it's not it's fine at the beginning, right? Like, cause it you can use that as a base to kind of like move forward, right? But there has to come a point in time where you have to really think about like, what is my ideal life look like, right? Like, what does the good life for me look like, right? And how can I like move towards that, right? And be very like stubborn about it. And at that point, you kind of,
I think it's important to make sure that people like you don't need a clear definition of success. You just need an idea because it's going to change as you go
totally,
anyway. You're going
100%.
to it ebbs and flows.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
like
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
that's right. I think we're on a bit of a delay anyway. It seems to be a thing with this like
Oh, okay.
software.
Yeah.
It's like slightly out
All good.
in terms of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think having that clear, not even a clear definition, just an idea of like you said, you want to go to design school. You're like, I want to do that. I'm going to go to the geography one, the urban planning one, and you're like, well, actually, I might just be doing this for my parents because it's the school, there's the status, it's all of that, and you have to take that plunge to move away from it. But yeah, I think but you don't. No, you said you don't need that. It doesn't need to be clear. You just need to be open,
Right.
to accepting it or like discovering it along the way.
100%. Like there needs to be some sort of, it's always going to change, right? Like throughout your life, right? But there needs to be some sort of direction that you're doing for yourself, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what are you doing for yourself and versus what are you doing for other people, right? And what you're doing for yourself, whether that's like, it could be like something as simple as like, I'm going to cook for myself today, right? Or, you know, I'm going to take myself out on a date to a coffee shop, right? Like it could be as simple as that. You know, there needs to be things in your life that you are doing for yourself. It can't all be, you know, for other people. Like, you know, of course you should definitely do that. Like if someone asks you like do something for them and ask them a favor, right? Like, sure, like definitely go do that, right? Be a good person, be a kind person, right? But there has to be aspects of your life where it's like, I'm doing this for me, right? And you have to be very, in some people's eyes that will actually come off as very selfish, right? Like, oh, you're only doing things for yourself. Like you're only always thinking about yourself. It's like, no, like, I actually don't think that's selfish. Like I would say that's more like a form of like self-love, self-respect than anything else, right? Like I am putting myself first because that's who I am at the end of the day, and I live with myself in my thoughts, right? So like, you know, it's a form of self-love, but yeah, you know,
It's nice.
Even
it's
like
full circle from what we said earlier.
yeah, it's full circle. Even like, you know, that example I just gave of like doing favors for someone else, that can actually be seen, in my opinion, as coming from yourself, right? Because you're happy to do that, right? It's like, I'm happy to go drive you to the airport, right? And that fulfills me. So in realistically, like there is a part of it that's like, I'm doing this for myself too, because like it fulfills me, right? Although like it's technically like something for you, like it is also something for me, right?
Yeah, but it's like the values of like, I value helping people when they need help.
Exactly.
So you're gonna go and help people.
Yeah.
How do you draw the line between like doing something for someone else and doing something for yourself? So if you were to start a stream, or you were to, you know, post something on Instagram, or something with like your academic journey, or whatever it is, how do you draw the line between saying like, I'm doing this for me and I'm doing this for someone else? Whether it's, you could use any example, like
Yeah.
going to a different school,
Yeah.
the clothes you wear, for example. Like,
Yeah.
how do you draw the line?
Yeah. I think for me, simply, like if it fulfills you, right, then you're doing it for yourself, right? If you like doing it, you're doing it for yourself. Right. If it doesn't feel like work, if there's no sort of friction, right, to doing something, then you're most likely doing it for yourself, right? Like you just enjoy doing those things, right? So it should be as little friction as humanly possible, right? But if there is any sort of friction at all, right? Let's say like you're, let's see, an example is like, I'm trying to think of an example here, right? Yeah, like posting on Instagram. Very, very, you know, relatable example for everybody, right? Like posting on Instagram. If you're having doubts of posting on Instagram, or like you're having second thoughts, and because that's points of friction, right? In that whole process of like posting something, right? Where you're like editing the thing, you're like editing it like to the point of like, you know, people probably won't even recognize what that tiny little speck that you just took off, right? You know, some can say that you're doing that for yourself because like you enjoy having like pristine like photos, for example, right? And that's fine. But at any point in time where you feel like, oh, I don't know if this is good enough, right? Like that simple line of like, you know, I don't know if this is good enough. It's like, well, okay, well, who are you doing this for, right? Like, you know, if it was for yourself, you wouldn't care, right? But if it's at that point where you have friction of like just posting something, in the Instagram example, of which you're probably doing this for the sake of like likes, for the sake of attention, for the sake of like wanting like someone, your crush, to see it, right? Or like wanting a specific group of people to see it, right? That's at that point where you start caring a little bit too much about what other people are thinking, and you care a little bit too much about, you're not really doing this for yourself anymore. You're doing this for the sake of other people. And I think the simplest way I can put it is when there's friction. Yeah, it's definitely hard. Like it's not easy. Like I'm not saying this is like an easy thing for sure, right? It's definitely difficult. Like I still go through that all the time, right? Same with I don't know if you use Twitter a lot, but I use Twitter all the time. Where I just post my thoughts and stuff
sometimes.
Like that. Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Twitter is just kind of like a dump of like thoughts, right? Of people's thoughts. But there are definitely some times where people, you know, will tweet something out and they'll delete it, right? Or they'll tweet something out and like they'll write it out, but they don't post it, right? Because of like they're not sure how it's worded, they're not sure how it's going to be perceived. That's an exact example of like, you know, you're doing this for other people right now. You're not really doing this for yourself. Which, you know, I do want to say doing things for other people is not always a bad thing, right? It's definitely not always a bad thing. But there should be a part of it that's like, I am doing this for myself. It needs to be a balancing act of both. Ideally more on the doing this for myself side, but yeah.
No, I agree. It's really difficult because say you post something on Twitter or Instagram. Say you post on Instagram, you post like a selfie and it gets, I don't know, this say it gets like 20 likes or something, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then you post one at the gym and it gets like 60 likes, and then you post another one and it's like at home and it gets like 10. You're kind of having that, you're like, oh, that's a big difference. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's almost like the biological aspect as well,
Yeah.
which is like, well, the chemical aspect of it.
And I think like, again, it's a lot easier said than done for sure, right? But if you think that way, like if you look at the numbers, right, and it affects you like emotionally, and you're like, oh shoot, like, you know, like, oh man, like this sucked, or, you know, like you start feeling down about it, which is totally normal, by the way. Like it's the totally normal thing to feel. You are
Which is
subconsciously
weird.
caring a little bit too much about, you care a little bit too much about what other people think, right? And it's hard. Like on Twitch, I actually I did this very early on, but I disabled everything. Like I don't see any numbers except for like my my, like, you know, how long I've been streaming for, right? But I don't see like viewership. I don't see like, you know, I see followage as well, but like viewership is the main one. Like I disabled that like entirely. So I don't see it
100%.
because, you know, it does affect your mood, for sure, right? Which is actually kind of sad to say, but it's true. That's kind of like the
It's
world
true.
we've been living in.
I like how that ties in. The first thought that came to mind when you said that was how it ties in with what we said earlier, with like stresses relative to people. So if someone like me or you get maybe like 10, like the viewership went up by 10 or 20 or 30, we're like, wow, that's really big. If it goes down by 10, 20 or 30, we're like, oh, that's really bad. But if you were someone like Pokimane and it drops by literal thousands, it's like you've got the same stress just on like a different relative. Like, it's kind of mental,
100%.
especially when those numbers don't mean anything. Like it takes 2 seconds for someone to click follow. Like it doesn't, if you've got it seems insignificant to someone who's like there every day, they're chatting, they're like part of a community, or even like on Instagram or any other platform, or, you know, IRL as well. Like the value of different people in your life is like, it's not defined by a number. It can't be.
It shouldn't, right? It definitely shouldn't, but it is what it is.
There's a
right?
Like I mean, it's designed to like hook you on that basis.
Yeah, definitely, right. I'm actually curious to know from your perspective, like, have you ever felt that way, and, you know, have you done anything to like combat that, right? To like not think about like, you know, any sort of number, whether that's on
for sure.
any social or anything like that.
For sure. When it's Twitch, don't look at view counts. I don't look at follower counts. I don't look at sub counts. It was about, I started streaming in August, and then around November time, it started picking up. It started picking up like early, and then it started picking up faster like November, December time. And I was like hooked on numbers. Like every stream, I was like, and like they send you the email afterwards, like here's your stream summary, and I was like, right, what's happened? Like, what's going on? What's this compared to last week or the last month?
Look at the times.
I was really into it.
Yeah,
you're like, right, what's the peak? What did the title work? Fine, all this stuff, and it's like you're going into it. And yeah, I was just getting just miserable with it. Like I was. If it was that, like you said, if it goes down a little bit or it goes up a little bit, you notice it and it affects your mood, and like you're kind of swayed by the numbers, which are completely outside your control.
Right.
Especially doing study streams, which you know, December, it's Christmas, people go home. Like naturally, it's gonna like dip.
Right.
And I never thought of that, obviously being new. Like I never thought of that being a thing. So after Christmas, I was like, I don't care about numbers. I'm gonna press go. With podcasts, I see the numbers because you can't physically look at the video without not seeing the numbers. But they're no value to me. My value is like sitting here with you, or sitting here with any guest, or talking to someone afterwards and they're like, oh, I really related to what that guy said, or like, oh, I listened to this one, I really like, that really helped me think about this, and I'm like, that's the value for me. which comes from like it's kind of where the whole podcast stems from, I guess.
I love that, dude. That's awesome. I love the whole idea behind the podcast as well, and I love what you do, like truly, right? I was in your stream like yesterday actually, just like, you know, lurking and stuff like that. And it's always a fun time. Always a fun vibe.
It's so silly.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it because, like, you know, you know, it's funny, like, just talking about like study streams for a little bit. 90% of study streams like use like the same sort of music, right? Music is kind of like one of the main things, right? Like just the lo-fi stuff. Like even I do that sometimes, right? But I remember when I came into your stream yesterday, it was like, I think it was like nearing the end. Like I think you were like kind of on your last poem, you were like kind of ending. It was a hype time. I felt like I was in a freaking club. And I loved every second of it. I was like, yes, we need this. We need more of this. But it's so different.
It's cool. I mean, I get the whole lo-fi thing because it's easy to work to. It's like I work to like jazz and lo-fi like off stream.
Yeah.
But like on stream, it's like it is kind of a meme at this point. We're kind of like the shady underground underground club of like co-working.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's great. It differentiates you, which is awesome.
It's good fun though. But there was so much anxiety around that because I was first introduced to study streams through Rumpel.
Right.
Who was always like lo-fi. I used to work to her streams last year, especially during lockdown. That's kind of like where I entered. Right. And I was like, I love this, but I like don't like the music. I found myself like doing the pomos and like listening to YouTube. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try doing it myself. And I did it just for fun at the beginning. It was like you said, I was like, I just feel like it's something that I want to do for me. And it started and people came in, people came out, some people liked it, some people didn't. And then around up to that November time, I was like, shit, if people were like actually coming to the stream and they're listening to the music and they don't like it, they're going to leave. And I'm like, well, I want people to stay. Right. And then I'm like in that little loop and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I love the music.
I had that exact thought and the exact process when it came to mine as well. It's crazy like how easily things can shift, how easily like our perspective can sway based on music and like just like, you know, numbers. It's incredible in all the worst ways, but like it's good to recognize it for sure.
It's a good thought experiment, I think, to kind of dive into how do you word it? It's nice to have the figures. It's nice to know that you're like on a path, and it's because it has to be sustainable. Like what you do has to be sustainable. Like you can't go to a university and do a course that like isn't going to lead anywhere, and you have no like because there's like the sustainable aspects to it, which is the balance. But yeah, I think like you said, finding as long as it aligns with your values, and you can recognize the stress, and it's stress that you're happy to put up with. You're like, you know, I've got problems in this, like, but I'm happy to go through those problems because I know that the end goal and the journey itself aligns with me, aligns with my values. Like, I think that's a really important distinction to make.
It is, right? And I think it's about finding meaning as well, right? Like you have to find meaning in the stuff that you do. And an exercise. So I mentor a lot, actually. You know, I mentor like up and coming students, up and coming designers, like career switchers, like daily, like every single day. And a question that I always ask them, you know, when they're doing something is like, okay, well, why are you doing this? Right. And you keep asking yourself that question until you get to like a very like root meaning. Right. Because, you know, if you can't find meaning in the thing that you're doing, you're essentially doing it like for, well, quite literally no reason. Right. Or the reason is just like not actually like, it's not a good reason, to be doing the thing that you're going through. Right. So you should always try and find meaning in the things that you do, even if it's like unclear, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm trying to do this because like, you know, I'm trying to like, you know, figure out if I like it. I think that's a very good reason, right? To like try something, it's right? And that's the meaning part. Yeah. It's a good reason. Right. So it doesn't need to be clear, but you should have some sort of reason or meaning behind like, you know, everything that you do in life, at least for the most part.
Well, like I said, it's kind of like your own North Star, like you're having, you know, defining that meaning no matter how small, even if you're like, oh, I'm just trying it because I want to see if it's fun. I'm just trying it because, you know, me and my partner want to have a good time, or, you know, it seems interesting. Like, at least that's better than just like you said, especially with older habits. Like if you're going to class, like piano classes because your parents always wanted you to do it, and you're like, why are you doing this? Well, my parents want me to. Yeah, but do you want to do it? Well, no, not really.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I still try to figure out what I still try to find ways to like break out of that sometimes, right? Because like I can say all these
Mm.
things and like, because I've been through it, right? But for someone that has like not gone through it, like what are some actionable things that they can take, that they can start doing to like kind of break out of that mold, right? Of living the life of other people versus their own. And I unfortunately don't really have like a concrete answer to that yet, but like it is definitely something that I constantly think about, right? Like, is it truly just
Mm.
based on thought and based on, you taking action and like going against the grain, and taking that punch, or is there another way to do it that's a bit more seamless, a bit more like less abruptive? I'm not sure, but it's something I think about all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like we said before, I'm sure it changes all the time.
Yeah, 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 100%.
I think the key to what you said was it's the courage to take that step on the
Yeah,
ice, to say like, okay, the acknowledgement that you're first in that position, and then saying, okay, well, I need to take a step in a
yeah,
direction, which is terrifying. Like you said, having gone through it, you can look in hindsight, you can be like, that was so worthwhile. But for someone who hasn't gone through it, and they're like, well, the ice isn't broken yet, like I'm still here, so
yeah.
I'm just gonna stay
Yeah,
here. Like,
it's the safe zone, right? It's the safe zone. No, definitely,
yeah,
definitely. It does take a lot of courage. It's like an immense amount of courage and bravery uh to do anything against the grain, right? It's
mm,
hard being different, right? Because like people are going to think that you're against them, right? They're or not with them, and they're gonna question you. And obviously, going through all that stuff kind of sucks as the individual, like trying to be different. Right? You have to like kind of like try and prove yourself. It's hard. It's hard being different,
mm,
but you if that's the path you want to take, if that's the direction you want to go in, then you have to go through that sort of that that stage of being uncomfortable, before you can be
mm.
comfortable again, right? But those are the areas of which like you'll always develop the most, in my opinion, right? Like you will develop personal development will happen very slowly for you if you never take action on like things that you truly care about, and you're just kind of like living life based on someone
That's
else's
true.
view, right? So if you care about personal development, I highly encourage to anybody that's listening to this to think about something in your life that you've always wanted to do but have always like hesitated because of like some other person's perception or whatever it is, and
Mm,
just take that step forward, right? Like if it's drawing, right? Like not everybody is a good drawer, right? But like, and you gotta take the step forward to like take out a piece of paper and a pencil and start drawing, right? And that takes immense courage, even if it doesn't seem like it, right? It does. And acknowledging that it takes immense courage is actually like a good like mental boost as well. It's a confidence boost, right? And it's something that I talk about all the time as well, is like celebrating those small wins, right? And small wins can be
mm.
so small, like taking that piece of paper out and start drawing, right? Or like putting on clothes to go grab a coffee to like make yourself feel a little bit better, right? And celebrating those things will just the confidence boost in your mind, will make it feel like you can do anything, right? It's like, oh, if I could do this and like I feel
Mm.
good about it, then I can probably do this other thing, right? And it feels good. So do not diminish like the small little things in life, right? Like grabbing a coffee and like going out of your way, to getting out of bed to like go grab that
Mm.
coffee, because it helps a lot over time. Celebrating those small wins.
It's massive.
Yeah,
From like the intention that you're actually taking that step and saying like, I'm going to take a bit of paper and a pen and I'm going to draw for the next hour. Like the intention of that is huge,
yeah,
and the like you said, it's such a weird. You said it takes a lot to be different. I feel like there's a distinction between being different and being special. Like people think, or I definitely used to think that like being different or taking that step meant that you had to be on some kind of path to be like the best. You had to be exceptional. You had to be
mm,
special. Like whether it's artist, music, whatever. Like you have to be like the biggest. And it's like, well, actually, no. Like you can draw for yourself.
right,
It doesn't like nobody even has to see
right,
it, and it can still be something that's like immensely important to
right.
you. You might, you along that path, you'll probably have the inclination to be like, well, maybe I will have a gallery opening or something, or an exhibition somewhere. But but you don't have to.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be the next fucking Picasso. Like, you could just make art because you love it. Like,
exactly right. Yeah, 100%.
And that, I suppose that's where the comparison comes in, because you can be like, oh, I really want to start, I don't know, I'm gonna do product design or something, you know, product design, and you go on Instagram and you type in product design, and there's like all these amazing looking setups, and you're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do it then, because it's never going to be like that. But it's like, well, no, it doesn't have. You don't have. That's going back to the comparison, I guess. And you're also stopping yourself.
100%. Something that I truly believe in as well is you have to believe that you can do it, right? If you're going to do it, you have to believe that you can do it. The moment you say that, like, I don't think I can do this, and like, yeah, you've already lost, right? Like, obviously you're not going to be able to do it because you don't believe that you can do it, right? So it's a mental thing. It's a mental shift. It's a mental barrier, right? Like, you have to believe that you can do the things in order to actually do them.
It sounds like such a weird concept, doesn't it? Like, you have to believe to do it if you want to do it. And it's like, you kind of feel like being like, well, obviously, but then at the same time, it's like when you're in that position, it's like, like you said, it's those little tiny thoughts, like, you know, oh, I'm gonna, you said, I'm gonna maybe sell some drawings on the website. Great.
Right.
You're like, oh, but no one's gonna buy them. As soon as you thought that thought, if you don't acknowledge that it's there, it's gonna cement itself.
Yeah, you're already like putting yourself in a hole, like just based off of that thought, right? And I think self-talk is so important. Like, self-talk and just like visualizing like things is something that I used to do a lot. Is like, I would get excited over the thought of something being possible, right? And something that I think people need to do more of is stop thinking about what can go wrong and start thinking about, like, focus on the things that can go right? Like, imagine if this worked out, right? Like, imagine if, like, you started drawing and, like, you got really, really good, and you started selling, and like things were looking up on all ends, right? Because of like your art, right? But most people, like, I think the opposite of, like, oh, this is never gonna get anywhere, or like, I'm just, I'm not gonna be as good as this person or whatever, right? So when you think that way, it's like, well, obviously, if you think that way, then, like, yeah, you're not gonna be good, right? So one tactic that I've always done is just get excited over the possibility of things, right? And just imagine yourself being in that position of like, really liking what you're drawing, and like getting excited over that, like the future possibility. And that helps with like that mental boost of just motivation and drive to help you get there, right? It's crazy.
I fucking love that. The enthusiasm. Or as you were speaking, I'm thinking, like, we all had that at some point. Like, when you're a kid and you're like playing outside or wherever you're playing, and you've got toys, and like the tin soldiers are marching, or like you're an astronaut going to space, like, you believe that, like, your imagination is there, like the enthusiasm's there. You're climbing that tree, like you're in the jungle, like we've all had that, like, kind of thing, singing into the hairbrush in front of a massive crowd of people. Like, it's so possible.
I love that.
Be interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that spark gets lost.
Right.
As we grow up, I suppose it's just age. But
I think so, right? Like, you just kind of start losing it, and realize it, like, the quote unquote real world kind of starts to hitting you, right? But it is such a powerful tool, right, to keep that intact, right? Keep that imagination intact to the point where, like, you start feeling it, right? Like, the hairs on your arms like start going up, right? Like, you are imagining yourself, if you wanted to, like, become a pro skateboarder, for example, you're imagining yourself like being in competition, right? Like, having the adrenaline rush of like being in this competition, being in a skateboard competition, right? And that feeling of being that deep into imagination where you can start to, like, emotionally feel it will help you a ton in just getting started, right? And be that driver for, like, I want to feel that, like, for real, right? And that's an extreme example, but, like, for anything, you should try and visualize that.
I think it works. There's so many quote unquote success stories where that has happened as well. When you listen to like a band, and they're like, as he was growing up, all he used to do was like listen to music and pretend that he was on the main stage, and all he wanted to do all his life was music.
Right.
And then he's like one of the biggest rock stars in the world. It's like, even at that small age, they're just like, they're living that dream.
Yeah. It's funny though, because, like, My thesis in university was all about, it was around entrepreneurship actually. And, I had thought about, I was deep into entrepreneurship when I was in university. And, I was thinking about like, why aren't people like doing these, like, why aren't people going after entrepreneurship more? Right. And a psychological fact that I had discovered, just based on like my research and stuff like that, is essentially, um, people don't believe that they can be a specific type of person. Right. So like when they think about like, that little kid that became a rock star, right? They're like, oh, like, no, I can't be like that. Like, I'm not that type of person. Right. Like, or like, that's never going to happen to me. Right. And that is the absolute detriment to your growth. Right. And I studied
That's what's stopping you.
yeah, I studied like the most, some of the most successful, like, at least the ones that I knew, entrepreneurs around me that were like at a relatively young age, like my age or and around there. And their thought was the complete opposite. It's like, I always believed that this could happen, right? I just had to like actually do it, right? Like there is never a moment in time where I had doubted that like I couldn't do this thing, right? And that's the difference, right? Between like, if you're just a simplest example like of like being a successful person versus not successful person, right? The difference is the thought of like, well, what is your mentality at when you're thinking about like, whatever you think is success or not, right? Do you believe you can do it, or do you not, right? And if you don't, then you won't ever get there, right? You have to believe in the possibility, in order to, have even a shot at that. Like, it's almost like the thought of it being possible for you is you yourself giving you a shot at that thing, right? And if you don't take it, well, then you're obviously not gonna get there.
It's not gonna
Yeah,
happen. It sounds so
exactly.
simple
Yeah,
when we say it
yeah,
out loud, but like obviously this is like months, if not years of like
yeah.
process.
Yeah. Sorry to everybody that I'm making this seem so simple. It is not, right? Like it's something
No,
that will take time.
yeah. And you get to an obstacle in the way, you're the kid who wants to be a rock star, and you go to your first gig, and the guitar string's broken, and
Mm.
you've got to lug like a 40-pound amp behind you, and you're like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. And
Yeah,
like you've got to like reaffirm yourself again to
right.
be like, no, okay, I'm gonna drag it over, I'm gonna get a new string on, like it's fine. Like you have to
Yeah,
keep, it's a continuous process, like all the time. And sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes it will like you'll be
yeah,
like, no, okay, I'm done. And then you pick yourself back up, you start again, and you'll be like, okay, no, carry on
yeah.
again.
But I think that those are points, those are moments in time, like those failures are moments in time for you to reaffirm that like you still believe in this thing, right? Because I think failure is so powerful, right? Like I think you can take failure in two ways. You can take failure as like, oh, this is terrible, I'm gonna give up now and quit, right? Because I failed, or quote unquote failed. Or you can take it as like, this is a learning lesson, right? Like, if my string broke, I'm gonna get better strings, or like just triple check that like, my string is intact, right, before I get on stage, or like my amp or whatever,
Love
right?
that.
Like
Love
it's
that.
a learning lesson to actually become better for the next time, right? And if you take all your quote unquote failures that way, like you're just gonna end up leveling up, and you're just gonna keep getting better and better and better. It's not bringing you down in any way at all, unless you think it's bringing you down in that way, right? If you think that like this is a total failure and I'm gonna give up now, then yeah, you're not going to get anywhere, right? Like you've truly made that a failure. You've given up, right? But failures should always be thought, at least try to be thought as like learning lessons always. And they really do like make you better, in whatever it is that you're doing, right? Because you now know to not do that thing, or how to make it better in the future. So we should
Yeah.
embrace it,
You get the
honestly.
experience of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I completely
exactly.
agree. It's like you were saying
Yeah.
about stress, it's perspective.
Yeah. Like there's and oh, and another thing is that, you need to, in terms of your mental, like you have to be in a safe place with yourself to be able to like do that, right? Something that at work at my current company that we stress a lot about for like new hires, right? And kind of everybody in general is like, they essentially tell you like, we want you to make as many mistakes as possible, right? And we're okay with that. Like we're not gonna like fire you because you made like 10 mistakes here, right? Like we want you to make the mistakes so that like not to do those things like again, right? And they create such a safe space for that, right? Because they invite it, right? It's so like failure is invited, to the process that like, you don't, you do things without it like any care, right? But not because you don't care about it, but without like just because like you don't stress about like if this is gonna suck or not, right? You do it, you try it. If it sucks and it fails, then you now know and you move on to the next thing, right? And I think that's
you can reflect on
that we
it.
should
You
do within
can
ourselves
say
too.
it's hard.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so many good points. Like perspective, having the courage to do that. Like you said, it's especially what it sounds like in your own life. It's been a process of like having the like little bits of courage to look at yourself and acknowledging like your setbacks or flaws or failures, and then being able to learn from them, and then the next time like being a bit more courageous and having a bit more perspective and learning a bit more, and it's like builds up and up and up and up until you can get to a stage where
Exactly.
you're like, okay, these are my values. I need to switch schools. I need to do this. I need to go on a
Yeah.
hiatus from streaming. I need to do. I know you had a couple of other projects, like what was it, Legacy as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
things like that. And
Oh
you're
my
like, I
God.
need to like move
You did
forward.
your research.
Yeah, I went deep dive, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, all this, I can see the kind of process of it throughout your life building up, which is so sick to hear, man. I'm really, really
Yeah.
happy for you.
Thank you, man.
And your
Appreciate
journey.
that.
I really appreciate you sharing everything that you have shared. It's
Yeah.
beautiful to see.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for asking all those questions. Like I by nature, I think I'm a pretty open person for the most part, right? Like I love sharing stories, mainly because if it can help out one person, then like it's a win for me. Like I'll share it to the world, right? So I think stories are extremely relatable sometimes, for people. So and if that can help people like move forward in life, then like I'm all for it. So
I think it's vital. If it's like you're saying with the when someone comes and they're like, "Oh, your course is easy. Like you don't have to do any exams." Like I want these like kind of episodes to be like snapshots where people can be like, "Oh, there's so much depth to it," because
yeah.
everyone has that depth to their own life.
Mhm.
It's just I don't feel like there's enough like you said, a filtered Instagram picture doesn't show you someone's
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, no, 100%. You see like the things that they want you to see, right? It's crafted. It's crafted.
For sure. That's awesome, man. I got a question that I've been asking everybody.
Yeah,
If you're
100%.
interested, we've been going for it's been like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm
Jesus,
so
that flew
sorry. This
by.
is long. Yeah,
No, I love it. I love
yeah,
it. It's so good. There's so many good
yeah,
points. It's if you could go back in time and speak to a younger version of yourself,
yeah.
what would you say? Any
Any
age.
age, younger version of myself. I would say, I think if I was speaking to like my 14-year-old self, for example, like I'm still in high school, right? I would definitely say don't hold back and avoid regret as much as possible. Right. And yeah, avoid regret as much as possible. Don't hold back. And if there's something that you want to achieve or do, you have all the power to do it. There's nothing stopping you. And I think that's
I
what
love
I would
that.
say. Yeah. Like
When you
you
say
are your own
avoid
hero.
regret, you mean like
Avoid regret as
when
in,
you say yeah.
yeah, avoid regret as in like, if you feel like trust your intuition, trust your gut, right? Like really trust your gut, right? Like, cause regret comes from not following intuition, not following your gut, right? When you go against it, like that deep gut feeling that like, oh, this might not be good or this is gonna be amazing or whatever, right? You should follow that thing, because if you don't, that feeling will always be there until it's like proven wrong or right? And that time period of when it's proven wrong or right is regret, because you didn't actually like act on it, right? Because you didn't trust your intuition. So you should. I think intuition, trusting your intuition, is something that I had to learn over time for sure. But trusting your gut and intuition is something that I would definitely tell my younger self, for sure.
Gotta have the confidence to trust it. It all
Yeah,
ties together so
right.
nicely, like the self-love, being
Yeah,
courageous, being brave, respecting
yeah,
yourself. Like I have these
yeah,
feelings, like it's okay to have them.
yeah,
That's awesome,
right.
man.
Yeah, it definitely all does tie together for sure, right? But I think regret is something that we, it's something that I have thought about for so long, and I truly think it's like when you don't follow your gut, that's when regret sets in.
It's nice. It's a nice way to think about it. I haven't thought about it like that before. I think that's really, this puts it in a really simple way. It's like, shit, yeah, it is. Some
Yeah,
people live with it their entire lives because they never try and figure it out
yeah,
in
and
some way or another.
it sucks. Yeah,
Dude, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
yeah, this was
It's been an
amazing,
honor.
man. This was amazing.
Feels good, right?
Yeah, it feels great, man. Like honestly, like, you know, I love talking about this stuff. Like it's not even like it's like I talk about this stuff for myself sometimes, like, you know, just like reaffirm that like, you know, do I still truly think this way, right? And you know, if I can help someone, if someone can like relate to this, can resonate with what I'm talking about, then, you know, amazing. Even if it's just one person on this planet, right? That's worth it to me.
It's
And
cool.
yeah, no, thank you so much for reaching out. I had a blast. Like I haven't had this type of conversation in a long time, and it feels really, really good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I
Yeah,
could do it with
I
you.
love it. I get
So
so high off
yeah,
it.
yeah,
For real.
100%,
I
right?
get
So much.
like even with like friends and stuff, it's hard to have like
Yeah,
conversations like this much detail where you just deep dive into it. Like it's
yeah,
sick. I love it.
yeah. Me too, me too. But you know, the pleasure's all mine. It was an absolute honor, to be part of this. So I'm happy for it.
No, thank you for coming on. I'll put if anyone wants to reach out, I can put links and stuff like in standard places. There's always
Yeah,
opportunities.
yeah. Feel free to reach out to
If
me
there's anything to plug,
on any platform. It's fine. Yeah, I'll read it.
yeah, I'll chuck some links there.
Yeah.
Cheers, man. Well, until next time.
Yeah, thank you, brother. This
Take it
was
easy.
amazing.
Thanks for listening and all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, this was great, and I hope everybody, whoever has made it this far into the podcast, thank you so much, and I appreciate everybody. So thank you
Until next time.
for sure.
Bye.
See ya.